It all began in a quiet suburban neighborhood in the outskirts of Philadelphia, where John Millard, a 52-year-old landlord, lived a seemingly tranquil life. Known for his friendly demeanor and successful property business, John was well-liked in the community. But beneath the surface of his outwardly normal existence lay a dark obsession that would lead to a tragic end. In June of 2020, John rented out his basement apartment to a young woman named Emily Daniels. Emily, a 28-year-old artist with a vibrant personality, had recently moved to Philadelphia to escape a troubled past. She was looking for a fresh start, and John's offer of a spacious, affordable apartment seemed like the perfect opportunity. John, a divorcee, was instantly captivated by Emily's youthful charm and beauty. Despite the significant age difference, he was drawn to her in a way he hadn't felt in years. He began spending more time around the basement apartment, finding excuses to check on her well-being, repair minor issues, and engage in casual conversations. Emily, grateful for the assistance and unaware of John's growing infatuation, was friendly and polite in return. As the weeks went by, John's interest in Emily escalated. He became possessive, monitoring her comings and goings. He installed additional security cameras around the property, ostensibly for safety, but in reality, it was to keep a close eye on his new tenant. Emily noticed John's increasing attention, but dismissed it as harmless concern. One evening in late July, John invited Emily for dinner at his house. Feeling obliged and wanting to maintain a good relationship with her landlord, she accepted. The dinner started pleasantly enough, with John sharing stories of his life and expressing a deep interest in Emily's art. As the evening progressed and the wine flowed, John's behavior grew more flirtatious, making Emily increasingly uncomfortable. Sensing her unease, John abruptly apologized, attributing his actions to loneliness and too much wine. Emily accepted his apology, but from that night on, she kept her interactions with John strictly professional. However, John was not willing to let go so easily. He started sending her gifts, flowers, expensive art supplies, and even handwritten letters expressing his feelings. Emily, feeling trapped and unnerved, politely declined his advances and returned the gifts, but John persisted. In early August, Emily met someone, Michael Thompson, a photographer she had met at a local art gallery. They quickly hit it off and started dating. John noticed the change in Emily's demeanor and the presence of a new man visiting her apartment. His feelings of rejection and jealousy festered, turning his infatuation into an unhealthy obsession. One evening, John confronted Emily about Michael. His voice trembled with barely restrained anger as he questioned her about their relationship. Emily, shocked and frightened by his intrusion into her personal life, firmly told him that her relationships were none of his business. John, visibly agitated, stormed out, but the confrontation left Emily shaken. Over the next few days, Emily noticed that John's behavior became even more erratic. He would appear unexpectedly at her apartment door under the pretense of checking on things or delivering packages. Emily started feeling unsafe in her own home and decided to end her lease early. But John had other plans. On the night of August 15, 2020, Emily's life took a tragic turn. She and Michael had planned a quiet evening at her apartment, watching movies and discussing an upcoming art exhibit. Around 9 p.m., Michael stepped out to grab some food from a nearby restaurant. It was a decision that would haunt him forever. When Michael returned just 30 minutes later, he found the door ajar. As he pushed it open, his heart sank. Emily lay on the floor, blood pooling around her head. In shock, he rushed to her side, but it was too late. Emily was dead, and the peaceful apartment had become a horrific crime scene. Michael frantically called 911, his voice breaking as he tried to explain what he had found. The police arrived within minutes and began securing the area. As they combed through the apartment, it quickly became clear that this was no random act of violence. The murder appeared personal, deliberate. Outside, neighbors gathered, their faces pale and expressed expressions grim as they whispered among themselves. News of the brutal murder spread rapidly, and the quiet neighborhood was engulfed in fear and speculation. But as the investigation unfolded, one question loomed large. Who could have wanted Emily dead, and why? The investigation into Emily Daniels' murder began with the immediate suspects, those who knew her well and had recently been in contact. As detectives canvassed the crime scene, it became evident that the killer was someone familiar with the layout of the apartment. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing appeared to be stolen. Emily had let her killer in. Michael, still in shock, was questioned at length. His alibi was airtight. He had been seen by several witnesses at the restaurant, picking up their dinner during the time of the murder. After cross-checking security footage and timestamps on his receipts, the police ruled him out as a suspect. Attention quickly turned to John Millard. He had a clear motive, a history of obsessive behavior, and had been visibly agitated when Emily rebuffed his advances. Investigators approached John's house, which was just a few steps away from the crime scene. They were greeted by a nervous, fidgeting man who claimed he had been at home all evening, watching television. John's account was filled with inconsistencies. When asked if he had seen or heard anything unusual, he hesitated before answering, as if carefully crafting his response. The police requested permission to search his property, and he reluctantly agreed, though his face grew pale. During the search, detectives noticed something odd. John's basement door was locked from the inside, and he seemed unusually anxious about them entering. After a brief standoff, John finally handed over the key. Inside, the officers were shocked by what they found. The basement, which had once been Emily's living space, was filled with photographs of her, candid shots taken without her knowledge. There were notebooks filled with obsessive writings, detailing her daily activities, interactions, and even the clothes she wore. It was a disturbing collection that painted a chilling picture of John's fixation. Among the items was a small box containing a hairbrush and a few personal belongings that had gone missing from Emily's apartment over the past few weeks. It was clear that John had been watching her closely, collecting these items as macabre souvenirs. But this wasn't enough to tie him directly to the murder. Then, detectives discovered something even more damning. Hidden beneath a pile of old newspapers in the corner of the basement was a blood-stained knife wrapped in a towel. The handle was smeared with blood, and the blade matched the wounds found on Emily's body. Forensics would later confirm that the blood was Emily's. John was immediately taken into custody, his demeanor shifting from cooperative to hostile. He insisted that he was being framed, that he had no reason to hurt Emily. But the evidence was overwhelming. His obsession, the surveillance, and now the murder weapon all pointed to one conclusion. John Millard had killed Emily Daniels in a fit of jealous rage. During interrogation, John's story continued to unravel. Under pressure, he admitted to having feelings for Emily, but denied any intention to harm her. He claimed that on the night of the murder, he had gone to her apartment to talk things out and make her understand how much he cared for her. He recounted how he had knocked on her door, and after a tense exchange, she had reluctantly let him in. Emily was alone, waiting for Michael to return, and was clearly agitated by John's presence. They argued, with John pleading for her to leave Michael and be with him instead. Emily, terrified and desperate to get him out, tried to calm him down, but when he saw the packed suitcase by the door, he lost control. In a chillingly calm voice, John described the moment his world shattered. He realized Emily was planning to leave, not just him, but the apartment altogether. His jealousy turned into blinding rage. In a fit of anger, he grabbed the kitchen knife from the counter. Emily screamed, trying to push him away, but he stabbed her once, twice, and then repeatedly as the reality of what he was doing slipped away. Covered in blood and shaking, John fled the scene. He locked himself in his house, cleaned up, and hid the knife in the basement, convinced that no one would ever suspect him. But now, confronted with the evidence, he broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, his voice barely a whisper as he muttered, "I didn't mean to. I just wanted her to stay." As the details of his confession were recorded, the reality of what he had done seemed to dawn on John. He had taken an innocent life, driven by a toxic obsession he could neither control nor understand. Emily Daniels was dead because he couldn't accept that she didn't want him. News of John's arrest sent shockwaves through the community. The friendly, mild-mannered landlord they had known for years was revealed to be a disturbed, dangerous man capable of unspeakable violence. The basement shrine he had built to his obsession with Emily was plastered across every news channel, the dark, twisted nature of his crime horrifying everyone who saw it. With John Millard's confession in hand, the police had a clear picture of how Emily Daniels' life had been brutally cut short. However, the legal process was far from over. John's defense team attempted to paint the murder as a crime of passion, arguing that his mental state had been compromised by his obsessive love for Emily. But the prosecution was determined to prove that this was not a sudden, unplanned act of violence, but a premeditated murder driven by jealousy and possessiveness. The trial began in March 2021, drawing widespread media attention. John, once a respected figure in the community, sat expressionless as the prosecution laid out the gruesome details of the murder. They presented evidence of his obsessive behavior, showing the court the photographs, the notebooks filled with Emily's daily activities, and the blood-stained knife found in his basement. They argued that John had been stalking Emily, his fixation growing more dangerous as she pulled away from him. The prosecution's key witness was Michael Thompson, who tearfully recounted the night he found Emily's lifeless body. His testimony painted a vivid picture of the horror he had walked into, emphasizing the brutality of the crime. He spoke of how Emily had feared John in the weeks leading up to her death, how she had mentioned feeling watched and unsafe in her own home. John's defense attempted to discredit Michael's testimony, suggesting that he might have exaggerated his account to demonize John. They portrayed John as a lonely, heartbroken man who had simply lost control in a moment of intense emotional turmoil. But the evidence was irrefutable, and the jury was visibly moved by Michael's account and the cold, calculating nature of John's obsession. As the trial progressed, the prosecution revealed a critical piece of evidence that sealed John's fate: footage from one of the security cameras John himself had installed around the property. The camera, positioned near the side entrance, captured John entering Emily's apartment just minutes before Michael left to get dinner. The time-stamped video showed John leaving the apartment roughly 20 minutes later, blood on his shirt as he glanced around nervously before retreating to his own house. The jury watched in silence as the footage played, the image of John's guilt undeniable. His calm demeanor as he returned home after committing such a heinous act left the courtroom in shock. The prosecution argued that this was not the behavior of a man who had just lost control, but of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. John's lawyer tried to counter this evidence by claiming that John had simply gone to Emily's apartment to talk and had accidentally hurt her in a scuffle. But the autopsy report, presented earlier, showed multiple stab wounds, some of them defensive. Emily had fought for her life, and the violence of the attack suggested a frenzied, uncontrolled assault, not an accident. On April 20th, 2021, after just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. John Millard was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was read, John showed little emotion, his face a mask of resignation. Emily's family, present throughout the trial, broke down in tears. They had lost a beloved daughter, sister, and friend to an act of senseless violence. Outside the courthouse, Michael spoke briefly to reporters, his voice choked with emotion. Emily was a beautiful soul who deserved so much more. She came here to start a new life, and it was taken from her in the most horrific way imaginable. I hope this verdict brings some sense of justice, but it will never bring her back. The case left a deep scar on the community, a reminder of how quickly obsession can turn deadly. John Millard, once seen as a respectable landlord and businessman, had been revealed as a man consumed by his own twisted desires, willing to destroy the object of his obsession rather than let her live her life without him. As the media coverage faded and life in the quiet neighborhood slowly returned to normal, the memory of Emily Daniels lingered, a young woman full of promise and hope, taken too soon by a man who couldn't accept that she was more than just his tenant. She was a person with dreams and aspirations, snatched away in a moment of horrifying violence. The story serves as a stark warning. Sometimes, those who seem the most ordinary can harbor the darkest secrets, and obsession, left unchecked, can lead to devastating consequences.